both domestically and abroad, for a wonderful evening to not only learn about the Freedom Riders, but to really learn about this incredible guest. You have seen him on television, movies, and on racetracks. And tonight we're going to look at him as a child in a classroom. We're going to look at his own family and how they deal with education. And hopefully for all of you teachers, educators, parents, and students out there, hopefully you're going to walk away with a lot of hope. So what I want to do first and foremost is I want to introduce Patrick Dempsey. Many of you know him as Dr. McDreamy, to our Freedom Rider family. Welcome, Patrick.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited, very honored to be here, and it's quite an introduction, so hopefully I live up to that. but it's great to see you. It's been way too long.
It's been way too long. For those that are not familiar with our relationship, Patrick plays my husband in the Freedom Riders film. And that is both wonderful and weird because everybody thinks that I am married to Patrick Dempsey when I am out in the world. So that is a blessing and a curse, Patrick Dempsey.
Sorry for
But what I would love to do tonight is look at your career through the lens of how your career has really helped our story, our mission, and our mandate. And what you probably don't realize is what you afforded the Freedom Riders was this opportunity to be storytellers, not just in the book, not in the movie that you made, but in classrooms around the globe. And so tonight we're going to be looking at ways that you have helped us and how we're going to pay it forward for us to help others. And so we're going to be celebrating your story while we're also celebrating ours. So I thank you for giving us an opportunity for that.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. What a great way to learn.
So for all of you teachers, what I want to say first and foremost is you're going to be thrilled that Patrick is so punctual. Oh my God. He said it was maybe that all that races he did in Germany and in Switzerland because they're very punctual. But Patrick was so on time tonight that the teacher in me was thrilled. So let's start there. Where did you get that skill of being so punctual?
Well, certainly in the theater, you need to be on time. You need to be early. And working in Germany with Porsche and working in Switzerland, to be early is really early. So to be on time is to be early and to be respectful and to be prepared. And I think that's what it shows. It shows respect. And you need to be there at the appointed time. That's your job. And you should be there early and be prepared for, especially traveling. I mean, it's a little easier right now in California. There's less traffic on the roads, but you have to take that into consideration anytime you leave to make sure that you're there in time. It's a show of respect, I think. I know. It's a sign of respect.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Well, there's a joke in our Freedom Rider family. We'll be talking about them a lot tonight, but there's like real time and there's Freedom Rider time. And so this illustrious group of young people have been in my life literally since 1994. And for 20 plus years, I still trick them because I want them to be as punctual as you. So they're on to me by now. They're absolutely on to me. You can imagine with all the planes and trains and automobiles that we've had to take throughout the years, what it's like to wrangle cats, I say. So we'd love to get that Swiss watch that you have to make sure they're as punctual as you are.
Right, good.
What I'd love to do to start is I wanted to queue up some opportunities to have courageous conversations throughout this hour by showing a spotlight of what we do that will foster a really great discussion. So I want to tell the audience what to expect in this next hour. We basically have 4 pillars at the Freedom Riders Foundation. And as I stated earlier, Patrick is a part of each of them, unbeknownst to him all these years ago when he joined our family. And what we want to do is highlight how teachers everywhere, students everywhere, and parents everywhere can have agency, independence, and a voice. And so the first thing I wanted to show the audience and Patrick is how this story evolved from my classroom, which was room 203, with my students, and has been able to cover the globe. And we now work with teachers in every state in America. and dozens of countries worldwide. So I just want to give you and the audience watching at home just a glance of how you are on their televisions, in their computers, and in their world as being a part of our family. So let's take a look at how we teach teachers to be better.
They were the gangsters, the taggers, the chronically apathetic, and they weren't very good at English either. And who was the first-year teacher assigned to handle these kids? It's Stand and Deliver meets that girl.
Miss G announced that we were gonna start writing. The whole idea was that basically the same way that Anne Frank journaled, we were gonna journal.
The diary, it just gave you a purpose.
We had a record-breaking graduating class that year, and it was because of the Freedom Riders. You know, because there was 150 Freedom Riders that should have dropped out that didn't.
The Freedom Rider story has been published as a book, filmed by a Hollywood studio, and captured in a gritty, heart-rending documentary. In whatever form it's taken, the story has inspired and touched people all over the world, and the story continues today.
When our story got out, a lot of teachers wanted to know how to replicate the progress that we made in room 203. And the Institute was the best way to do it.
Erin takes what she did in room 203 and duplicates that in this Institute in 5 days. It's phenomenal.
A kid deserves the best out of their teachers. If their teachers can come to us and now have that network to continue to be the best, the kid wins, and that's what it's all about.
Sometimes as a teacher, we get stuck in a rut and it's hard, and I'm trying to be this advocate for my students, but it's just me. So I'm hoping to help these kids get to where they need to be.
The work that the Freedom Riders Foundation does would not be possible without our amazing donors. So please, help us change lives by donating today.
So Patrick, I want to start there. I wish that one of the Freedom Rider teachers that I've been blessed to teach, I'm still a teacher all these years later, I wish they had Patrick at 5 years old who went into a classroom and struggled. So can you tell teachers what the 5-year-old Patrick was like, and what that classroom was like for a student who struggled and didn't know why he was struggling?
Yeah, I remember the first moment where I realized I was struggling. I'm not sure what the grade was. It was very early on. And there was an exercise where the teacher had put up the big paper, right? The big yellow paper that you would fold over and they would write. Well, I came in, I just finished recess. So I came in, I had a lot of energy that was blown out so I could focus, but I was sitting further back and I couldn't see the board and I couldn't keep my place. It was basically just write down what's up there on the board on your piece of paper. And it was very hard for me to keep track. And it just felt like as time went by, my mind started worrying about, oh, I'm behind. And then I started looking around and I lost my focus and I felt behind. And that was a moment that was really the defining moment for me in going to school. It was a painful experience. It made me feel bad about myself. It made me feel that I wasn't as good as other people because I wasn't able to keep my place and write everything down in the right time. I struggled with that. And that just came up with the comment that you just mentioned. And, for me, I probably could have done it if I was if I had a piece of paper next to me and I could track it with my fingers and those little techniques because I kept losing my space. And of course, it would be many years later that I was diagnosed properly with dyslexia. And by then, it was much harder to kind of find the tools and the skills and the teachers that were available and understood what I needed at that point.
I want to go there because as an English teacher myself, I had Freedom Riders who were 14 and 15 years old who were transferred into my class and like you had never been diagnosed. So they too, like you, couldn't write what was on the board. They too were terrified to raise their hand and read aloud. And I always say that sometimes kids are the first one to be picked on and often the last to be picked to be in that social group. So did you face a lot of bullying from other kids who thought they were smarter or wiser? And what was that like socially as well as academically when you did feel different and you were falling behind?
Right. I also wanted to get a lot of attention, right? I wasn't getting the attention. So I would act out inappropriately and was constantly sent to the principal's office for disrupting the class. And for me, it was just really frustrating. And it was a way to avoid the real issue, which was not, it was really such a struggle for me to find the word, to even identify the word, or even read the word, that it just made me feel bad. And I would try to do anything I could to distract. And of course, that became a behavioral issue, which sent me to the office, which then set in motion this, pendulum effect, which then put me into the at-risk classes, and then, the special ed classes, and then you're labeled something else. So it progressively got worse.
And I think of all the words that we're using, that just as an English teacher, words have power. So when you think of the word disability, it's
I hate that word. I don't want that word.
I have a wonderful friend.
I don't like it.
She likes to use handy capable. But she has really made me cognizant of how we address kids when we call them special ed.
Well, you label, once you put a label on it, then it sticks, and then that becomes your identity. And then it takes years of work to get away from that. And you have to be very careful of that with everybody, but even more so with younger kids.
Absolutely. Do you think that you're juggling? I know you are an expert juggler, but do you think that might have been your salvation, that I need some kind of accolades or attention, so I'll juggle and distract so they won't call on me to read? Do you think that was maybe a self-defense that you created?
Certainly, and I think you want to have, at a certain age in your development, teen years, as you know, you need mastery over something. So for me, sport was a way that I could express myself, that I could release my emotions and my feelings. And it gave me something to do that made me feel good. I had a sense of accomplishment. So athletes, and I think a lot of people struggle, they can be really good physically, and some people aren't good physically, and they have the strength to be an academic or something like that, or vice versa. It's like, how do you connect those abilities and go with the child's natural ability and sort of inclination,
I think what I learned, kind of like guerrilla tactics in the trenches, was to go where my students were at. And you saw in that video, and she's right here on the cover of our book, Sue Ellen, really close. I remember Sue Ellen giving me a piece of paper, and within 30 seconds, I thought she might be dyslexic, just the way that she inverted letters and the way she wrote. And when I said it to her, she had these huge crocodile tears, but then it was this, aha, there's a name for it. And maybe there's a solution for it. And we were able to get her help. So what was it like when you heard this word dyslexia? Did it feel like it was an epiphany, or did it feel like it was something shrouded in shame? What was it like for you? Suddenly, the way you processed had a name.
No, it didn't really register until many years later. It was more just like, I'm still struggling with school. Now we have a label, but I don't feel any different, and I'm not seeing any changes other than some exemptions to classes. But still, at that point, they really weren't approaching, dyslexia the way they do now. The skills were not there. The understanding of it wasn't there. So it helped a little bit, but more it was just another label.
What I admire is you, not only were you athletic and you're passionate about your race car driving, which we'll talk about later, but the irony is you chose a profession that is based on words. And
it's the worst profession
and a script. So let's talk about that. I can imagine for someone who has dyslexia, what you were able to do beautifully is you beat it. You had to figure out a way to take those words in that script and bring them to life in your way. So how did you do that with that very first play, with that very first television show, with each and every movie that's come after? How does someone with dyslexia take their that pain, and it's now your passion, it's now your purpose?
It's hard and it's scary, and you have to go into your fear. And what, someone once told me, what is in the way is the way, right? Which makes a lot of sense, in the sense that what's in the way is me reading. And what do? As an actor, you read. You have to do a reading, a table reading, or a blind reading. So I'm constantly confronted on a daily basis with my shortcomings. And you have to put your ego aside, because if you don't have some sense of humility, it will eat you alive and it will destroy you. And you have to go, okay, I'm going to figure out a technique to get this. It's painful. It's what I've chosen as a profession. It's part of my karmic journey to overcome this issue. And I think there's going to be real liberation if I put pen to paper and I actually write a story. I think I will break through, because I will do it in a way that will not be by the rules, because I can't function that way. I'm going to be writing in a way that how can I physically and visually express this? And through the medium of television or this, I could do that. But I've never done Shakespeare. To overcome the language and to understand the nuance of it and the rhythm, I've never been able to do. It's one of the greatest regrets that I've had. So certain things I haven't been able to do because of that, and I just haven't had the strength to overcome and to work hard enough to do it. And that's the big challenge, because it's reading out loud. Table readings are really, when you do a reading, you get a new script and everybody wants to sit around and you want to read it so that the writer can hear. It's an experience just writing it, but when you say it, it may or may not work. And for me, if it's overwritten, I have a really hard time comprehending it. And you want to simplify it. And sometimes that's really good, because you tell the writers, like, you've made your point 5 times. Can't you condense it and just and give it almost like a haiku? I'd rather do that. And I've had terrible times where I couldn't remember things because it didn't connect emotionally to me. It was verbose for the sake of just a writer writing, and it sounded really good for the writer in the room. But when you get up and you try to act it, it gets in the way.
I think every teacher that is watching right now probably has both anxiety that you are sitting at a table with fellow actors and reading, and yet also we're cheering that you mastered it, you did it. And so my question for you, if there is a student watching, and there is, and a student who is struggling, which they are, what could you tell them about overcoming this obstacle, overcoming this adversity?
I think you have to really look at what your passion is, what you really love doing, and focus around that and learn around that. Because then you'll really want to do it. You'll have a reason. What's your goal? What's your objective in that? And then try to go after it. The wonderful thing now is we have the technology that we didn't have before. We have voice activation, so you can put your thoughts down on paper. And journal keeping is really important. If you look at Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, in that book, and this is another thing that I'd like to get back to, I think is really important, is the morning writing. Get up in the morning and write how you're feeling. Or just dictate into a tape what it is, and then you edit it on your phone, if you have a phone. If not, you can borrow one. That's an opportunity to get your thoughts and your feelings down on paper, and then you can look at them, and it allows you to release that. So you're not holding on to the emotion of those things and those feelings. You don't necessarily want to send it to a person, or you're just doing it for yourself, but do it in the morning and then do an evaluation in the evening. If you can do that, that's a great start. And you have to understand, everybody is a unique individual, and there's gold in who you are, just being who you are. The problem with Instagram, social media, and all is that you're putting out there a world that is not necessarily attainable for everybody. And it shouldn't be. And you're only seeing one half of the story. You're not seeing the reality, you're just seeing what they want to present to you. So don't compare yourself. As easy as it is, as hard as it is, and I'm saying this as much to myself as I am to you, is we cannot compare ourselves to other people. You can compare yourself to another person. If it's a negative thing, it's usually something that you're identifying in yourself that you don't want to look at, and you put it on them. So first ask yourself, what is it that's bothering me about that person that's in me, one? Or what is the great quality that person has that I want in me, that I can develop? What is that trait? And go about it that way. And remember, you're special for who you are. And it will take you time to find the gold and to harvest it and to bring it out and to polish it. And that's what life is about. It's about perfecting yourself over time.
I want to tell our audience something that happened organically because of you being our guest. Is we partner with a lot of universities, many of whom specialize in how do you teach teachers. So we're blessed that they think that the Freedom Writer methodology is a great way to have empathy and to go where students at. what they wanted to offer our audience, if they're watching and they want to learn more about how do you teach to kids who have learning disabilities, to have that sensitivity, to have those techniques. And it's called Waldorf University, and they're actually going to offer.
What's the name of the university again?
Called Waldorf University, and they are
Waldorf University.
Waldorf, and they are going to offer continuing education units, starting with lessons about Patrick Dempsey. So you become the face of having educators understand, how do kids overcome that learning disability? How do we not put that kid in the corner? Or if they go to the principal too often, let's figure out why. So you are allowing us to launch this amazing opportunity for teachers to know more, to be better teachers. And if anybody wants to know more, just email us or in the chat room. We would love to have you be their muse, Patrick, because I think for a lot of kids, the court of public opinion and people that have star status like yourself, suddenly you take something that might feel like a stigma or stereotype and you've humanized it. They can look at the screen and say, I could be like him. And so that's really my goal, is that there's teachers who can be more sympathetic to the students they teach, but also kids who can say, if he overcame it, why can't I? So before I move on to our next subject, what I want to ask you as a parent, what was that like when you started sensing that one of your sons may process the way you do? And your son, we're going to call your son handy capable, when maybe your son was struggling to read those words and hadn't discovered the art of juggling like you did. What was that feeling for you like a parent, that what I went through, my son may go through?
Well, first it was just, I was paralyzed with anxiety, fear. I was overwhelmed with the thought of what I have gone through, and to think that they would have to go through the same thing was just so debilitating at first. Really hard to do anything with my kids in school. At first, I wasn't really conscious of how much of a block I had until it started to really dawn on me that actually it was first my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia, and we got out in front of it, and it was always something I was concerned about. And thank God, my wife's mother is an educator. She's a teacher, so she could see this stuff very early on. And we've got to get him with a specialist. We got to get her with a specialist. And I think that's your first step, is when you see a student struggling in your classroom, if you have the knowledge and the education to be able to do an evaluation, then you should. If you don't, then take it upon yourself and go, you know what, we need to get this student tested. We need to have a conversation with the parents. And sometimes the parents are too busy. Sometimes the parents are also probably maybe undiagnosed or having their own issues and cannot do it. And it's overwhelming for them. If you find the right specialist to get them tested so you can identify what the issue is, then you can put a program together to help them learn. And that's just the problem with the systems that we have. It's one box fits all, and that's not how we learn. Yeah. And so that's another question that we can't do right now. So we have to look at how we're educating kids. And if you're in a public school system, it's got to be incredibly challenging. And the fact that you're there is remarkable. Don't give up.
I thank you for saying that.
I know you're overcoming so many things to get into the classroom, and then trying to get the attention of the students, and if you can meet them there and understand what they're individually going through, then you can meet them where they need to be met. And that's part of teaching. And that's time. That's investment in you, in your students emotionally. And that's exhausting. Absolutely. And you're going to have to take time for yourself to recover from that and to fill up. Go ahead, sorry.
And I love that you're saying that, because in the film, ironically, one of the things that's difficult oftentimes for teachers when they're watching it is pursuing passion and having a significant other that's not as supportive. And there's a scene in the film that's difficult. Hilary Swank, who plays me, is taking my students out to these field trips, and she's bringing in these guest speakers like Neep Geese. And you don't participate. You don't want to go to see that movie, to go to that museum. And so what the Freedom Writers learned and have continued to do is some of those things that we did in my classroom that were different, going to see that movie, meeting that woman who saved Anne Frank, allowed us to be lifelong learners, that education doesn't have to be contained in a classroom between bells and whistles and grades. So I wanted to show you the Freedom Riders All Grown Up. What they have done is we call it our Meep moment. You know, they wrote letters to Meep Gates, the woman who saved Anne Frank, and she came. I mean, how cuckoo crazy is that? But she came. And now kids all over the country, oftentimes kids with learning disabilities specifically, write to the Freedom Riders, and they go visit them, and they bring a subject to life. And that pain that they had is now, like you, their passion and their purpose. So I want to show you what Freedom Riders do now as they travel the globe telling their story.
Outreach events through the Freedom Riders Foundation aim to connect students with the faces behind the stories in the Freedom Riders Diary. Whether it be in person or online, an event with Aaron Gruwell or an original Freedom Rider can make meaningful change in any community.
We've had Aaron here at least once a year, sometimes twice a year for the last 9 years. I think it helps kids and adults alike to recognize that not everybody's story is the same.
People come up and tell us, oh my God, that story was so impactful. I can't believe you guys were, experienced that. Just being able to kind of answer questions, to shake a hand, to me, that makes it all worthwhile.
When I present and I speak to students, I see that my story reaches students that normally we wouldn't be able to speak with. For example, students from Africa, students from Mexico. And sharing my story is sharing hope, is sharing that they can make it out of any adversity they're facing.
Your donation can help us empower students to become catalysts for change in their communities. By going to freedomridersfoundation.org, you can become a monthly donor and help us transform countless lives.
So Sue Ellen was the one that said sharing my story, and Sue Ellen is the student I mentioned who's dyslexic. So our story starts when they were in high school, and I want to take our audience to a high school classroom with Patrick Dempsey. Before hair gel, before you got in those beautiful Porsches and Ferraris, you were a high school student, and it was a little awkward. And I want you to paint a picture of Patrick Dempsey, the juggler, and the student that didn't feel as confident as you are now and didn't realize that you had a story to share as you do now. So paint a picture for our students at home what Patrick Dempsey was like in high school.
I was still waiting for puberty to hit me.
I don't think anybody believes you.
Everything was delayed in my life until much later. And then after I got out of high school, my education began in many ways.
Hair? How was the high school Patrick Dempsey hair?
It was big. It was very big without any kind of product in it. So that was the thing that was quite funny. But I did excel in sport, and that's where I could get people. But then I was always struggling because I was always on the verge of failure and not being on the team in some of those, classes that you can't participate in if you don't have your grades. And it was very frustrating for me. And then at that point, it was really kind of covering up and trying to fake my way through knowing things that I didn't know or reading things that I didn't know. And I think it was really very hard, and you start to act out a little bit more because of that, and then also too you withdraw and you start to do other things. And at that point, there was the shop class. I was doing shop class. So, and I tell this to my kids. I think you definitely, if you get a degree, great, but also do a trade. Have both. Have something that you can fall back on that you can do with your hands, so that you can always work. And this is something that we were talking about today. It's like whatever it is, have a trade. And my wife has a trade, and it's important. It's important to do that as well as having a degree. And for me, you're starting to talk about colleges at that point in high school, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was struggling in school constantly.
Your Patrick Dempsey of high school is actually our sweet spot. I think that when Freedom Riders go to a school, they spot the Patrick Dempsey in a corner, and that's like their soulmate, the kid that lingers, the kid that's not front and center raising their hand. I think there's something about us that really resonates with you then, the kid that feels invisible or feels on the margins. And that makes me sad that at that time that someone didn't take your hand and say, we're gonna get you to the finish line. And so I understand that you didn't graduate with your peers. So what came with that? Was there
well, there's a whole story about. So what happened was in school. So here's the beautiful thing about shop class, home ec, which I don't think happens anymore. But you have these special teachers who are outliers. They're rebels. They're in the van, right? That's what you want.
All Freedom Rider teachers are outliers and mavericks.
You have to be. So he was an ex-Green Beret. This is in the 70s in Maine. He had the beard, connected to the earth, and he played the hammer dulcimer. And in shop class, we were all making hammer dulcimers, which are these little instruments that are string instruments that you put on the table and you pound. They're sort of a Celtic instrument. And the power had gone out because it was a storm and we couldn't do anything. So Mr. McKinney started juggling. And I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. Do it again. There's something about juggling that everybody loves, right? And they find it to be magical. And he taught me, and I picked it up like that. And in that moment, my life changed, and it was never the same. Because then I found my out. I got from a small rural community, that was transitioning. It was a mill town. There was not a lot of work. There was a lot of things that had been but are no longer. So it's the ghost of that. That's the energy. That's sort of the environment that you're growing up in. And suddenly I became special because I could juggle and I would learn tricks. And that's how it changed.
I think for your very discerning audience, which I'm sure many women are swooning, you juggle in a lot of roles. I remember you juggled in Enchanted, and I've seen you juggle on Grey's Anatomy. So do you kind of organically work that into your role, or does it just happen on the set?
I think it's usually the directors love it and they think it's interesting and different. I do have to say that there's some incredible jugglers around the world right now, all over the world. And if you follow IGA, which is the International Jugglers Association, I'll see people who are juggling all around the world on the street. And if I'm like traveling, like I was in Brazil, and we stopped at a light, and this woman came out, and she started juggling, and she was performing and doing this incredible routine. And you're like, this is an amazing routine. As a juggler, you're like, this woman has so much technique, and she's getting this is how she's making her living. And I go, there for the grace of God, go I, because that could have been me. I could have been that person who was there juggling on the street corner. I know it was. That's how I made money for many years, was to go out and do that.
But I think what I think is interesting for teachers is you clearly are a kinesthetic learner where you have to touch and feel. And
yes.
You're a tinkerer. I know that with your auto racing, you actually get under the hood. So you tinker. And that's what a lot of kids do that have learning disabilities are visual, they're auditory, and they're kinesthetic, all the things that you do so well. So I wonder if the juggling was a way for you to be a part of something, but also showcase, like, look at me, I have this great gift, I have this great skill.
Yeah, you want to be identified, certainly at that age, right? And I'm seeing it with my boys now at 13, 14, 15. It's about mastery. It's about having your own identity and like, who am I? What am I? Who can I become? And for me, that was really I was ski racing. I was doing a lot of ski racing. I've been very successful in the state of Maine. I won the championship, so I was disciplined when I needed to be, but I had to be moving. And that's still how I learn today. Like if I want to learn something, I'll go to the source and watch and feel and smell and get a sense of it. And then it's in my muscles and then it's in my cells. That's how I learn. And the problem is though, the system isn't set up that way. It's, if you're a square hole and you got this round peg, you got to jam it in there. It doesn't work.
And that's why we're teaching these teachers
and teachers need to, but it also has to happen on a government level. I mean,
absolutely.
You have to understand, and you have to follow the science is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We should listen to it. There's the science of diagnosing how people learn. And that's how we should break them down and sort of put them in a classroom. It's like, okay, they're learning in this way. So let's do that. Let's focus on that technique of learning. And then this group will go this way, and then this group will go that way. Then you're empowering people. And you're meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for a lot of your fans, they probably remember high school Patrick riding a lawnmower.
I was Ronald Miller, so I was very much Ronald Miller, the geek. And
So
still for that, for the most part.
talk about that. I know you were no longer in high school when you had that really iconic role that kind of burst you on the scene,
Right.
driving that that lawnmower. But what was that like to go from a small town in Maine, using your skills to tinker, and then suddenly you're in a movie? What is that like for a small town kid to be in Tinseltown?
It was really overwhelming, and it took me a long time to figure out how to navigate it. You come from a small town. There are certain values that are there that you won't necessarily find in a big city like Hollywood. It's a different mentality, and it's very fast and it's unforgiving, and it's very heady once you start getting some success. So you go from very much the Ronald Miller, you go from geek to chic, and it's hard to digest that. It's hard to believe in yourself. And if you have any insecurity, you start to have people start to look at you and they're like, well, who are they looking at? This isn't clearly me. This is what I've not been. I'm still the kid who's in the special ed classes. And now I'm being told something else. It's very challenging to get your head around to accept it.
I think that's what a lot of freedom riders have faced. They were in my class for whatever reason. They had that learning disability. They were a disciplinary transfer. They were that foster kid. And I think when they became published authors, and then there was a movie, the way an audience saw them may not be the way they saw themselves. And I love how you said from geek to chic. I don't know if the freedom riders think they're chic, but that must be strange for you. And so probably what you see in the mirror is not what we see when we look on the screen. Is that possible?
Oh, I think that is. I think that's right on. And I think here's an example with Derek Shepherd, which is McDreamy. So McDreamy is sort of this idealized male version that all that energy you're asked to hold that. And I'm a human being, right? I am not perfect. I am deeply flawed like everybody else. We're here because we're not perfect. We're here to refine ourselves. So when you have something like that, you're holding that for people and you have to live up to that. And that's very hard. You have to find a way to realize that you are not that person and that you have to disengage. But yet when you go out, you want to meet that. You want to be able to live to that. So that idea, that's aspirational. So I want to work towards being a better person every day. Am I a better person than I was yesterday? Am I a better person tonight than I was this morning? And hopefully the answer is yes. But it's always very challenging because it's a projection. You fall into an archetype. And then also to the other thing is, are you worthy of this attention? And that question can either really calm you down or freak you out, or you may not feel worthy and you'll do things to sabotage yourself.
What I love about you, the boy that didn't graduate with your peers, you were Dr. McDreamy. And the fine folks from Bowdoin College, where Dr. McDreamy allegedly had got his degree, did a petition to give you your first of two honorary doctorates. So you have two doctorate degrees, one from Bowdoin and one from Bates. So what is that like? You actually now are a doctor, to be able to get those degrees from a university and have that to show your sons and your daughter.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and two incredible universities and completely different in identity and what they stand for. And really, Bates was the school that I never went into as a kid. It was something that was unattainable to me. Some kids would go and do their senior year at Bates or Bowdoin College, and that was never ever something that I entertained. That's something that I could ever be at. It's just so up there, and so monolithic, and it just over. And then when I got the doctorates in both of those universities, I wished I had understood that I could have done it. So anybody who's out there who is sort of seeing themselves as me at a younger age, you can do it. You're gonna have to work hard, but if you want to do it, you can.
Oh, I love that. I want to show another video that I think you and I talked about earlier that is really of the moment. You got to be not only a parent, but a teacher at home when your kids' world stopped, when the pandemic hit. So the Freedom Riders realized that they couldn't have that meet moment going to this class or working with that teacher. And sadly, all the teacher trainings that we always do every summer came to a ceasing halt. And so we realized, how can we make things for kids where they're at? Virtual learning and understanding all the insecurities that come with the mental health triggers and social emotional learning. So I want to show what the Freedom Riders were able to create in the midst of a pandemic. And as we come out of that, I want to talk to you as a parent about what it was like to have a daughter in the midst of her senior year, and it came to a screeching halt, and two boys who suddenly had to be homeschooled by you and your wife. So let's take a look at what the Freedom Riders did during the pandemic, and then you're going to talk about what you did during the pandemic.
Aaron Gruelle and the Freedom Riders created the Freedom Riders Foundation to provide educators with tools to empower all students to succeed.
I felt it was really important for us to continue evolving and continue creating curriculum that went to where a student was at. When the pandemic hit, we knew intuitively that quick transition from in-class instruction to online learning would be difficult for a lot of educators and students. We created a 12-week curriculum that really looked at mental health parity in our classrooms.
It was just a tremendous hope and a light at the end of the tunnel to get us through those tough times that while they were at home.
It was important to us to give that curriculum away for free. And we were thrilled that we had teachers in 70 countries who turned to us in a moment of need to use our lesson plans to help enrich their students' academic transition.
Please consider making a donation to the Freedom Riders Foundation so that we can continue to make heartfelt curricula to address students' social emotional needs.
So the world stops in March, and you've got a daughter who's a senior that has all of these things looming, proms and graduations, and two middle school boys who probably do everything, sports at all. Parent Patrick does what?
Wow, first of all, it was just nice to be isolated with the family and us not running all over the place. So yes, the class of 2020, my heart goes out to them. All of you have gone through so much from the very beginning of your academic careers to now. So much has happened in the world, starting with September 11th, all of the shootings in the high schools. And this was something I asked my daughter. I was like, the thing that you remember, what is it? She goes, the shootings in high schools and schools. So that's a generation who's really had to come to terms with that and the violence of that. And also the environment and where we're at. None of this, they didn't get to celebrate. They didn't have the ritual of finishing this. And I think ritual is really important. Like, you may think, the prom is not an important thing, but it is. It's a time to come together. It's a time of the community, your peers, where you celebrate and where you hold each other and you dance. That's a beautiful thing. And that was lost. And there's that emptiness. And there's that moment in time that only happens once. And my heart went out to her. And, not having graduation, all of those things, the social things, I think in the final year were really, really hard for her. And even now going into freshman year at college, she's not getting that experience. She's doing it in an isolational way. She's being isolated. And it really concerns me. And I think the thing that what you're working on is the mental wellness. We don't teach that in school. And that's something we should teach. How do you control your mind? Which leads me to this book I'm going to recommend right now. It's a perfect segue if I can. The other thing was like, what are we doing with our kids? How do we educate them? What do we do to give them the tools? Thank God I had we had everything in place so that they could learn virtually. I had special, teachers with math and tutors and things like that, because it's not something I am capable of doing. So I wanted to find a specialist to help them in whatever it was that they need and ask them, what do you need for me to help you? Okay? I'm not in your head. What do you need me to help you with? What can I help you with? And that's how we began the summer. And then the summer was really about how much freedom do you get? How much time can you go out with your peers? And then do you have your pod people where you're safe and are you responsible? And then reading, books on tape. For me, has been the way I really am well listened. I'm not well read, but I'm well listened. And a book that I picked up and I really love, because I talked about Marcus Aurelius. I was working in Rome last year on a show called Devils, which is coming out in a few weeks. I was in Rome. What an opportunity for me to learn. I had a teacher, a professor, an art historian, take myself and my daughter around Rome, one-on-one, and we had a history lesson.
So it's
So
art.
through that, I started to learn about Marcus Aurelius in the writings of meditation, which led me to finding this book called The Daily Stoic. And the author is Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday, I reached out to this week, and he does a program that I think you should check into, which is you can use the Stoic principles on a daily basis. And it really helps you. And I invite you all to get this or download it and to listen to it. This book in particular has written several. One is to overcome, how do you overcome obstacles? And there is real liberation in that. But I highly recommend this book and other writings by Ryan Holiday.
That's fantastic. Well, I believe that our viewers are voracious readers and lifelong learners. And so we'll put a link to that in the chat room right now. So my question for you as a parent who was home with your kids, was it interesting for you to go back to school again? Were you
No, it was horrendous. It was painful to relive it. It wasn't something fun. And I don't want to go and be young again. I'm very happy being the age I am. No question about that. But I am enjoying being a father and learning how to, admit what I don't know, and then finding out someone who does know, and that's okay. And that's part of being a parent, is not, you don't have to have all the answers, but you can go to people, you can put a team around you. The one thing I learned through racing and through sport is you have a team, create a team. And the same goes for educating your children and improving yourself. It's like, put the team around you that you want. And that's what it was, really listening to them on the emotional side. What did the kids need? And it's really the social aspect at this point was really affecting everybody. We didn't have a problem with the technology, and the teachers were in place. I mean, we had struggled in the last couple of years. We've struggled heavily, and we're suddenly turning the corner now.
What I think is so interesting about you that I applaud is you're so self-aware. There's a great humility. And I think when you have that ability to be humble and self-aware, that you can pivot on a dime, which I see that you clearly do, and you can model that for your sons and daughter. And I think what was hard for so many kids in this kind of virtual learning space was the isolation, and then all that came with it, the depression, the anxiety, not being able to have a team. And so I think that's why the Freedom Riders they rallied, because they felt like I was at that place as a teenager, and I don't want somebody to go down a rabbit hole. I don't want somebody to have suicidal thoughts, because there's something about our story where we often are the place where people outreach to. We get that letter of somebody on a ledge. We get that letter of someone who takes that razor blade and cuts too deep. So I love that the Freedom Riders who have been there in a dark place realize how important it is to be light. And I think that's really, in the roles that you assume, I think you always are light. And do you feel that you're attracted to those kinds of roles where you can be light and self-aware, even though your next role you're going to play a nefarious character?
But you have to
devils aside, when you are the archetype that is of positivity and of growth.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to be positive, but it's also important. Look, I have my questions, and I go into the darkness too. And I've had those moments where you're looking at the edge and you're going, why am I here? This is just, but you have to remember one thing that's important: impermanence. Impermanence and change, that is going to happen in life. Life is about change and how you can adapt to change. And usually right when you get comfortable and you think you've got this covered, you're going to have to change again. And that's okay. Make change friend. That's what you want to do. And think of it, that's how you grow. And I have self-awareness because I've been knocked down, and I was forced to have self-awareness because of the mistakes I've made. I've been on this planet for 50 some odd years now, so I've made a lot of mistakes. I have a certain amount of life experience, and there are a lot of things I want to learn and I need to continue to learn. But you get knocked down. You will get the lesson. Either you'll learn it the hard way or you'll learn it the easy way.
I love it. There was another thing that you mentioned earlier when you and I were speaking about what you learned was being a good partner. You know, in the Freedom Writers film, I go to juvenile halls every Christmas, and I have to tell you, those boys in that juvenile hall, they don't like you. And it's not that they don't like you, they don't like the character you played, because they always ask me, is that part of the movie real? And did your husband really leave? And suddenly you become this archetype of someone who wasn't supportive, but you are so supportive of your wife. And so can you tell our viewers who are in relationships what you learned about that give and take and that support? Because in the film, I think the line you said was, I can't be your wife. And you hear audible gasps when you said it on the screen, but you are very much your wife's partner and her equal. So how did you learn that?
Well, we've gone through a lot. So we've been married for over 20 years now. We've had our good times and our bad times. We come into it with when you come into a relationship, you have, like, I'm carrying all the stuff that we just talked about, about the shame of my education, about my intelligence, I have my family dynamics, and your partner has that as well. And sometimes there are these underlying things. If you aren't working with a therapist, you aren't getting in there and getting to work. It's like anything. It's like you have to work on it. And there are specialists out there. Go and work through these psychological issues. And in relationships, if you don't deal with them, you're going to repeat them. So you have to kind of go, okay, am I going to stay in this? Am I going to fight this out? Am I going to get in there when I need to? And when you take your vows, you have to go and you got to do that. And we had a little bit of a break, but we realized that we're gonna work through our issues. And I think as a partner, you're not going to agree on everything, and you're not going to want the same things, but that's okay. This concept of happy ever after doesn't work that way. You can have happiness, but it takes work. It's that you have to tend it. You have to allow your partner to go, what do you need for your own personal growth, separate from me, separate from the kids? What's your own individual desire? And finding a way to support that and to be able to communicate that. And then you have a relationship that starts to blossom, but it's challenging. But like you in the story, you had a higher calling. And you may not be aware of it, but you're being pulled because you have something to say and something to do. And sometimes as a partner, you miss your partner because that love is going somewhere else. It's not coming home. And you have to really work on yourself to love yourself. You need to be able to self-care. And you have to control your mind and the thoughts and your feelings. And you have to give a space for your partner to go off and do their own thing.
I think that's really a beautiful pattern that you've had is, you did self-care before you knew it was a thing. It's a buzzword now, but it wasn't when we were growing up. And I love that.
So I got turned on to a lot of interesting things early on. Robert Johnson was a Jungian doctor. He wrote he, she, and we. There are these really fascinating archetypes, breaking it down from a Jungian philosophy. And I really got into that early on in my probably 18 or 19. And I would go to lectures. And I would listen to lectures, and that's how I started to learn. And that was really exciting for me. So my education began once I dropped out of school, because then I started studying things I wanted to study.
That's for every teacher. They love that. It's an example of it's never too late. It's like the marathon, not the sprint. And that kind of cues up the last celebration what the Freedom Writers do. We realized that in the Freedom Writer world, they didn't come from traditional academic backgrounds. The 150 students that I had that wrote the book and then were the basis of the Freedom Writers movie, they were the first to graduate, the first to go to college. And it's really scary when you're the first. And you're sure. And I don't know if you know this, but the funds from our book allowed us to put Freedom Writers through college. The funds from the movie allowed us to give scholarships to teachers to come and be trained. And now what Freedom Riders do is they pick kids all around the world who really are young Patricks, the kid who had the learning disability, the kid who was sent to the principal, the kid who has that something special, and we want to see in them what they don't see in themselves. So I just want to show you about our scholarship and share with you something really special that the Freedom Riders have done in your honor of making this film.
For over 20 years, the Freedom Riders Foundation has been honoring the legacy of the original Freedom Riders by providing college scholarships to first-generation high school students who have demonstrated remarkable academic promise despite considerable odds.
It feels like a gift to be able to give that gift to someone else. When I sit back and I watch these kids, I'm so thankful to pass that along to someone else.
In 2019, we had our first opportunity to pay it forward to the second generation of Freedom Riders. We've known them since birth, and so they've grown up in an environment that was celebrating education. One of our recipients, we started calling him the doctor when he was in middle school, to give him a scholarship and to know that he indeed can blaze a new trail, and to pay homage not only to his mother, who's a Freedom Rider, but to grandparents who came to this country in pursuit of a dream, to be that American dream. And the doctor is that dream personified.
We need your help. Our Freedom Rider scholars embody the mission of our foundation. They teach us each and every day that access to education is the great equalizer for all. Join the movement and support education today.
So Dr. McDreamy, I want to showcase a scholarship they were so proud to give, which is going to cue up something incredible that you did in honor of your mom. One of my beautiful Freedom Riders, just like you, it was the marathon, not the sprint. She is going to be a doctor, like a medical doctor. And it didn't seem possible for her. She was undocumented and didn't know that she could actually go all the way. And she did. She graduated from college. She has beautiful kids who are now following in her footsteps. And when I thought about you tonight, I thought about one of the most amazing gifts that you have given is back in your community, the Dempsey Center that really specializes in cancer awareness in honor of your mom. And so you were that Dr. McDreamy. You have those honorary doctorates, but you believe in philanthropy. So can you talk about why it was so important for you to honor your mom, how hard she worked? I know she was a school secretary, and to do something in your hometown that raised you, to leave something that was permanent. And with the pandemic, I know every October you do this huge celebration, and so it's probably gonna have to be virtual this year, but can we celebrate your mom, and can we celebrate the good work that you do, paying it forward?
Absolutely. My mom had a really long battle with ovarian cancer, over 12 reoccurrences. It was over 15 years, and we lost her a few years ago. But in that, sort of the Grey's Anatomy took off and people were asking you, what's your charity? What do you believe in? What do you stand for? And I'd never been asked that question before, and at the time I was working with the Amgen Tour of California, which is a bike event. And the component was the Breakaway from Cancer Initiative. And it had prevention, and they had this group in there, integrative medicine. I was like, what is that? So they don't treat the disease, they treat the person. And I'm like, this is what we need in my community. And can you make real change? Yes, you can. All you have to do is look out your back door or your front door, and you can make a difference in your community. You don't have to worry about taking over the world. Just do something what is the need in your community? And can you help it? And can you fulfill that need? Or can you put a group together? And that's how it came about. What could we do to help my mother through her journey, supporting her on the psycho and the social aspect, which is what's really needed. And I believe the work that's being done at the center and other centers that are like-minded throughout the country is that integrative medicine should go hand in hand. As soon as someone is diagnosed, you should be working on the mindfulness approach to the disease, because it's relentless and it hits everybody. It's such a profound impact on the family that we support the caregiver and the family and the children. There are different groups. We work on nutrition. We work on the physical aspect through yoga and meditation, and then support groups. And then whatever else that person needs, what can we do to make your life better? You ask that question, you never know what you're going to get for an answer, then you try to fulfill that. And what I've learned is the meaning of life is about philanthropic work and having empathy. No matter how much money you make, you still have to look at yourself in the mirror, and you're still that person in the special ed class. You may be able to buy your way out of it for a while, but you're going to hit the wall at some point. You're going to come back to that. But when you start to do something for someone else and you feel what that feels like, that is what life is about.
So as you saw in that video, we have a Freedom Rider kid who just graduated. We called him the doctor, and his grandparents had an elementary school education. And I think the most beautiful thing for all of us watching us give him that scholarship was watching the family realize that he is the dream. He's the dream. So maybe when he is a doctor, he will come and work for the Dempsey Center and make.
I hope so.
And we figured if we just keep saying it, it's the power of words, instead of someone being told they're bad or stupid or dumb. We thought if we call him the doctor, half the Freedom Rider kids don't even know his real name because we just call him the doctor. We've called him the doctor for a decade. So we just thought we're going to actualize it. So,
well, that's what happens, right? If you say, and we've seen this happen in a positive way and in a negative way, and we're seeing it really with what's happening with the rhetoric that's coming out of our leaders in this country at the moment. If it's a positive thing, it's like you throw a pebble in a pond and it ripples, right? If you say something that's positive, that energy goes out. If you say something that's negative, it goes out, and it creates what your intention is. So when you say something like the doctor, that's a constant reminder of like, I can do this. This is right. I get the support to do that. And the same goes if you're saying something negative to someone over and over again, they're going to believe it. And it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So words have meaning and they have weight. So be careful on what you do and what you say.
Well, I want to end with what you said with philanthropy, empathy, and a ripple effect. Tonight was a way for us to bring together our Freedom Rider family and the Patrick Dempsey family and really celebrate the best of the human spirit. We don't often see that. And so for a lot of people who are watching, they have been the reason that we have been able to survive all these years, to do the good things, to educate teachers, to give scholarships, to make education that matters. And because you have put our story out in the world, I don't think you realize what it's like for Freedom Riders to travel and have kids say, I've seen that movie 27 times. In the midst of the pandemic, Patrick, Freedom Riders was trending on Netflix. And so that movie became a go-to place, a sacred space for a lot of people who were hurting and needed to be the light. So thank you for allowing us I could literally talk to you for 17 hours and I will do that to our audience.
And can I just say a couple more things before I go?
Sure.
Just to your point, and if you're wanting to write screenplays or you want to become an actor, you want to do anything like that, trust who you are, write from what you know. Show us your perspective and your point of view on the world because it's uniquely yours and it will be interesting.
Oh my gosh. Well, Patrick, my hope for you, honestly, is that we can instill this wonderful recording, have teachers who want to get continuing education credit to be able to start with you, to say, I can use his words and his story as something that's aspirational for my students. So I'm really hopeful to use this to pay forward, to make teachers bigger and bolder and better. And I just thank you for all of your passion, for honoring your mom, for going to where your kids are at, and for making people around the globe so happy with each and every role that you undertake. So
well, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's so, wow, it's very humbling to hear all this, and it's really beautiful to be a part of this with you, even though it wasn't the strongest of the characters in the sense, but it's an important one because you'll always have that negative voice that will try to stop you, and you can't listen to it because they're threatened by it. And it's okay, go on. Don't listen to those voices.
And I think what you have really galvanized is things are bigger than yourself. And I think where we have been as a foundation is it's bigger than us. You know, a teacher and kids have become a movement. And so we wouldn't be able to do the things that we have done if it wasn't for people like you, our donors, people who believe in us and believe in paying it forward. So I was just so honored when we tried to think about the perfect guest to kick off the school year. You know, kids are still at home and scared. I thought you were the perfect person to kick off the school year. And I mean that sincerely because I want people who are perfectly imperfect to be okay. And you are exactly that. In your perfection now, some of those trials and tribulations then is what made you so strong now. And I think it's just such a wonderful prototype for kids everywhere to look at you and maybe keep the eye on the prize.
Exactly, and I think it's to your story too. Look what you confronted, look what you overcame, and look at this movement that you have created with your passion and your desire. You knew deep down inside that it was the right thing to do when people told you it wasn't. And I think everything is so easy sometimes that you don't realize that you have to have adversity in life in order to appreciate the good times, and that life is about overcoming that. And that's why we're here, and it's okay. Don't run against it, embrace it. And certainly with the land of COVID that we're in right now, there's something in this in time that will be very good for us. It's just hard to see. And when we run into people, they need to know that they are loved. And I had this encounter on an elevator today, going to see someone. And I wanted that person to go first and to give them the space. And it was like a transformative moment that this person was like, "Oh my God, you're kind." And I'm like, yes. And it's like, that's what we need to do with each other right now. And it's so scary. It's so easy to lose your temper because there's so much happening, but come from your heart. And if you stay there, you'll always be safe and you'll always do the right thing.
Absolutely. So for all of you that joined us, may you lead with love. May you have it on your heart to help others. And that's what we are trying to do, is pay it forward with taking pains and making it a purpose. So thank you for joining us tonight. For those that want to learn more, please go to our website, freedomwritersfoundation.org. For those of you that want to download every single Patrick Dempsey show on Netflix, please do so. And for those of you that have philanthropy in your bones, please pay it forward, whether you want to help us help a teacher, help us help a scholar, or help us create the perfect teacher to have the perfect Patrick in their class. We thank you all, and we look forward to sharing this message. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good evening.